Good evening and welcome to the July 20th, 2026 Lakewood Reinvestment Authority. I call to order this meeting on July 20th at 6:05 p.m. And to connect to the meeting, please use one of the following links: lakewoodspeaks.org or lakewoodco.gov/council videos. For online public comments, you may post comments on any length at lakewoodspeaks.org, an online forum for public comments. We're leaving online public comment open during the study session and through 10 a.m. tomorrow morning for any comments related to tonight's presentation. So thanks so much for all of you joining this evening. We'll go ahead and ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Commissioners Bearway. Black.
Here.
Cruz I.
Here.
Cruz K.
Here.
Furman.
Here.
Kenworthy.
Here.
Kerr.
Here.
Great. LeBure.
Here.
Lowe.
Here.
Nystrom.
Here.
Ryan.
Here.
Siggs.
Here.
Wolfram is absent. Strom is absent. Chair Sharzai.
Here.
And I'm checking one more time for Commissioner Bearway. Commissioner Bearway absent. But you have a quorum and you may proceed.
All right, thank you. This evening for tonight's Lakewood Reinvestment Authority meeting, we have two topics: overview of municipal funding mechanisms and the financial plan for West Colfax. And we'll go ahead and turn it over to Director Chan to give us an overview of municipal funding mechanisms.
Be a super fun night. Thank you so much, Chair Sharazai. I will give two presentations where we're just talking about the toolkits that we have available in the city to invest in our communities, and then dive a little deeper into the West Colfax spend down plan. So let's start. Everyone see my screen? Great.
We can.
So again, I just wanted to walk through the three main tools that the city uses for economic development. We have the Economic Development Fund, we have the Lakewood Reinvestment Authority, and the Business Improvement Districts. And so tonight is really just to give the board and the community a clear picture of how these tools differ, so that when you see them referenced in future items, you can know what the distinctions are, and they'll be familiar to you. One of the first questions I get from people is usually, why does the city have these three separate tools instead of just one? And the short answer is just that each one is a distinct legal mechanism that's sized and governed to match a different scale of problem, and all three originate in a council action. So to start, the Economic Development Fund is created by ordinance and is a citywide incentive fund used to attract or retain individual businesses. It's oriented towards broad economic development goals like job quality and career pathways. Following, we have the LRA, which is created through an adoption of an urban renewal plan and finances redevelopment within specific designated areas. And finally, we have the Business Improvement District, which is formed by council ordinance at the request of property owners, and is funded by those property owners themselves to maintain and market a commercial area. So all of them have the same starting point with council action, but each one has a different tool for three very different jobs. Now, each of these tools traces back to a specific legal foundation, and that foundation is what defines what each of these tools can and cannot do. The EDF first sits in a Lakewood Municipal Code, Chapter 3.26, which establishes the fund itself. It allocates council appropriation and authority over how it's used and the eligible incentives that it can be used for. The Lakewood Reinvestment Authority operates under Colorado Urban Renewal Law, and that authorizes formation of the authority. And it requires a blight-based finding before a plan can be adopted, and it allows up to 25 years of tax increment financing once a plan is approved and in place. And then we have the bids, which operate under the Colorado Bid Act. And this authorizes formation by municipal ordinance. It requires an appointed board. It requires annual council approval of the operating plan and budget before the district is allowed to tax, spend, or borrow. I'm not going to read every single citation on this slide, but if the commissioners want and questions come up later, I can reference where we're working from on these legal bases. Now the scope
I'm not seeing the screen share anymore. So if you're talking to specific slides, I don't see them. I don't know if it's just me.
Commissioner Nystrom, we all see the slides.
Okay, no worries.
Do you, well, is it possible for you to email the slides over?
I can email them.
Great, thank you.
No problem.
Now, let's see, back into the scope. The difference with the scope is really about geography. So the EDF has no geographic boundary. It applies citywide to any qualifying businesses or project that council chooses to support that meets the city's economic development goals. This could be an incentive agreement, or it could be other ways that we can further these goals. The LRA is the opposite. It's limited to designated urban renewal areas. So we have West Colfax. Last meeting, we talked about Sheridan Boulevard. So these are the boundaries set by the board and the commissioners who y'all review and approve the urban renewal plans. And so only a property that's inside that specific plan will be eligible for funding. And then finally, the bid has an even narrower scope, and that's limited to the district boundary that it was approved when the bid was formed. And that boundary is set by petition of the property owners within that area, not by the city. The Alameda bid is a good example. It only covers the commercial properties inside that specific footprint. Moving into the goals, because the scope is so different with each of these funding mechanisms, the goals for each tool is also very different as well. The EDF is trying to attract new businesses and retain existing ones across the whole city, supporting strategic, high-value projects. And success is measured by the number of projects, the number of jobs created, and the number of the dollars that are invested and leveraged. The LRA exists to eliminate blight and catalyze private investment inside a targeted area, and success is measured by growth in assessed value and completed redevelopment. And then finally, the bid exists to maintain and enhance the daily vitality of one commercial corridors. So they'll work on projects like streetscape upkeep, security, providing service property owners that tax themselves services that they're funding. So success in the bid would look like how the district, the appearance overall, the activity levels, and overall business health. Moving into the governance structure, so who is actually making these decisions and who is answering to whom across the three different entities? The EDF does not have a separate board. Council does set the policy and approves every appropriation. And it's administered directly by the Economic Development Division as city staff. Then the LRA is an independent authority under Colorado's urban renewal law. It's governed by its own appointed board of commissioners, which are on the call tonight. And these board members are appointed by council, and the LRA reports regularly back to council. Finally, the bid is created by council ordinance and remains subject to council oversight, but it's governed by its own board. It's nominated by the district and appointed by council. And its operating plan and budget are approved by council every single year. And that annual approval is the accountability mechanism for a bid, and it often operates in practice through managing nonprofit. And so Alameda Corridor Bid, for example, works through Alameda Connects. So the funding source and approval path for each tool also looks very different. The EDF is funded through a dedicated special revenue tax built from accommodations tax. Council approves each individual incentive agreement. So spending tracks specific commitments rather than a recurring operating budget. The finance team also prepares the proposed budget, and council reviews and then approves it. The LRA is funded by tax increment financing, meaning that the incremental growth in property and sales tax captured within the urban renewal area is collected for spend. City staff will then prepare the proposed LRA budget. The finance team will review it, and the LRA board will formally adopt the annual budget and a multiple year financial plan. Council will review these financial updates regularly, and that TIF revenue sunsets once the plan's statutory term ends after 25 years, if not sooner. And then a bid is funded by a mill levy or a special assessment on the properties inside the district. The bid files its operating plan and budget with the city every year by September 30th, and council must approve it before the district is allowed to tax, spend, or issue any bonds. And again, this levy is certified to the county for collection once it's approved. And this is the most practical question. What can each fund actually pay for? EDF dollars can go towards business incentive grants, things like job creation incentives and sales tax rebates, and site-specific infrastructure or facade improvements tied to a signed agreement with performance metrics. LRA dollars, on the other hand, are limited to statutorily eligible urban renewal costs only. And so that includes land acquisition, infrastructure, environmental remediation, and blight elimination. And every expenditure has to tie back to an approved urban renewal plan. The LRA funds cannot pay for general government or routine operating expenses. However, that's why we have the bid. So funding can go towards operation and maintenance. This again involves the streetscape upkeep, landscaping and security, along with marketing, events, and district promotion. Bid funds are not intended for capital redevelopment or citywide infrastructure. And so taking a look at this slide, it's often it's just a helpful tool to see what is reasonable for spending and what might not fit the tool that's being asked when you guys are in community. So just closing, I have a side-by-side comparison, which I don't need to repeat everything, but I figured this would be a helpful tool for us to reference. And I just want the board to understand that each of these tools, as I've articulated tonight, has a very specific function, has this very specific purpose of how we can and cannot use based in statute. And so they all work in tandem with each other and are accountable back to council in one way or another. And so as we head into budget season in the coming months, hopefully this will give you guys a good basis of understanding for the plans that are coming forth. And that's it. I can open myself up to questions if there's any, as I went through that pretty quickly.
Great, thank you so much. Do you mind taking down the screen share?
Okay.
Any questions this evening on the presentation? All right, that felt like an ample teacher pause. All right, thank you so much. That's really helpful and great foundation as we move into our next presentation, discussing the financial plan for West Colfax Avenue corridor. So I'll turn it back to you.
Great. It's usually where I have technical difficulties, so please let me know if I'm not showing up on screen. Are we good?
We're good.
Oh, first time this year. So we've already addressed the funding in the last presentation. So what I'm bringing forward tonight to the commissioners is the financial plan for the West Colfax Avenue Corridor Reinvestment Area. This is the fund plan that will cover the remaining balance till 2030 when the LRA Urban Renewal Plan sunsets. So you'll see what we can and cannot do in the corridor and what we are hoping to move forward with. Very quick overview. As I walk through this, I'll give some background on why this area was designated in the first place, what tools the LRA has to work with. Then I'm going to work on plan objectives, how this actually gets implemented, our various funding priorities. Then I'll talk about community outreach that we have gathered for this plan, and then provide some early potential community project concepts before we dive into the details of the funding priorities and the funding plan itself. And so I'll have ample time for questions at the end. So before we get into the fun stuff, it's just worth grounding everyone just why we're here. So the West Colfax corridor was originally designated as an urban renewal area because it met the statutory blight findings under Colorado law. So that designation is what gives the LRA its authority to use tools like tax increment financing and land acquisition inside the specific boundary. This is not a citywide fund. It's scoped specifically for the corridor. So everything I present tonight has to tie back to eliminating those blight conditions and enabling redevelopment in this area. The original plan implementation shown here lays out where the LRA is trying to what it's trying to accomplish along West Colfax. At a very high level, we're trying to do three things at once. First, we're addressing the physical conditions that qualify as blighted. So you'll see things like deteriorating buildings, infrastructure gaps, and underused parcels. So what can we do with those? Second, it's just protecting what already works here. So that means what we want to retain, what we want to stabilize for the businesses that are already part of the corridor. So preventing involuntary displacements. And then third is just setting the conditions for the kind of growth that residents actually want. So that means better design standards, mixed income housing, parking that works for everyone, public spaces that reflect the corridor's history and character rather than something that's generic to any other part of the city. I just want to emphasize that this list is not fully inclusive on purpose, but it does provide a roadmap for what we can do with this funding. With the funding priorities, how does the LRA actually move on these objectives? So the plan also gives us a defined set of implementation tools. We can support redevelopment and rehabilitation of existing buildings. We can acquire property and assemble parcels where fragmented ownership is already blocking a project. So where a site truly cannot be reused, we can support demolition, clearance, and site preparation. We can also fund public improvements and facilities, so things like utilities, streetscape work that enable private investment to be feasible. We can also facilitate the sale or transfer of property to move a stalled site into productive use. And we can enter into redevelopment agreements with private partners. And throughout all of this, we work through interagency cooperation, meaning we cannot do this alone. We're coordinating this with other city departments, the county, other entities and partners where this tool can be leveraged and complement what we're trying to achieve. So given all of those tools that we talked about in the last presentation and what we are choosing to focus on first for our funding priorities, our top priority will be land acquisition for future strategic use. So that means parcels that are tied to infrastructure improvements, environmental cleanup, and projects we can finance into just existence. Second, we are prioritizing partnership with community organizations so that the businesses, residents, and developers along the corridor are working with the same shared goals rather than pulled in different directions. And then finally, we are prioritizing preservation and stabilization of these underutilized properties and sites near transit. And that's just because we know that the sites where there's LRA investment, we can unlock a much larger private investment. Again, none of this was built in isolation. This is a plan that has been in existence for almost 20 years now. And it is grounded in community input. So on top of implementing feedback that we found in all the other plans that have been conducted on Colfax already, our team has also met with various corridor stakeholders, presented to various neighborhood organizations, as well as incorporating what we've heard from these sessions into the framework that you're going to see. Just worth noting that this is just an initial list of how the engagement has started, and it will be ongoing. We do intend to keep the community looped in as projects come forward with more specificity, so not just at this plan adoption stage. I mentioned earlier that I would talk about some potential concepts. So again, emphasizing that this slide is not a final list. So these are early concepts that have come out of some of our community conversations. They're representing the kinds of projects that the LRA could support under this plan. They're not commitments. They're just some ideas for us to think about as we move forward. And so as planning continues, we get more proposals. This list will evolve. And so just including it tonight, so you see the direction that community input is pointing us towards. And this is the heart of the presentation tonight, the actual dollars. So in the 26-27 funding period, we are proposing 6 unique funding lines. As you can see, the largest is for mixed-use housing and commercial land purchase. This is our biggest strategic acquisition priority. Next, we have $250K for pre-development and site readiness studies. This is the technical work that has to happen before a site is shovel ready. So providing that information as we move forward. $150K is allocated for utility and access improvements at Cal Lake sites. That means that the site is most likely to unlock further private investments once basic infrastructure is in place. Then we have a proposal for a $400K revolving loan fund for facade and building improvements and mixed-use pre-development gap financing. This is something we've done on other corridors as well. So we want to see how we can have that money recycled back into the corridors as loans are being repaid. Early stage environmental site assessments and cleanup are budgeted at 1.1 mil. So this reflects how many parcels along this corridor have legacy contamination issues that have to be resolved before pre-development can occur. We know with the date of all these buildings, asbestos would be pretty likely. Brownfields are pretty likely. And so that's why this cost is a little bit high. And finally, $400K is set aside for partner identified eligible activities. So these are projects that the bid, nonprofit partner projects can come forward if they meet our eligibility criteria but are not fully scoped to reinvest in the community. And that's it for me.
Thank you for that. What questions do we have for Director Chan? Commissioner Black.
Yeah, thank you so much for the presentation and for being with us tonight, especially with no air conditioning where you are. I have just a couple quick questions. So one, with the final slide that you showed that showed the 4.5 million for mixed use housing, just can you clarify for me? So you're saying that since it's showing 2026, 2027 budget, you're saying that if there was a parcel available for sale, those funds would be sort of ready to be deployed in the 2026, 2027 time period?
Yeah, we have a consultant, EPS, has been doing a high best use study on vacant properties already on Colfax so that we can see what has been identified for board approval. So we are hoping to assemble parcels together that we can put together that could be more appealing for development on the Colfax corridor.
Okay, great. And I have just a couple other quick follow-up questions. And then it does say it's prioritization for mixed use housing and commercial. So can you talk a little bit more about what that might look like? You have an opportunity to buy a parcel and you'd be talking to the developer saying what we're trying to prioritize are mixed use developments here. Is that how that conversation might start?
Yes, that's how we're hoping to start. So similar to the motel properties that came to the commissioners, to the board earlier this year, we can, once we acquire the property and those parcels, we can issue an RFP with those specific asks in mind, and we'll see what the market can move forward. And yes, the intent is mixed use development so that we can preserve that commercial asset on this corridor.
Okay, great. And then I just have one last quick question. One of the things you talk about that was laid out in the plan was the idea for incorporating superior design guidelines. And it talks a lot about public spaces and landscaping. I know one of the biggest things that we hear from constituents, particularly along the Colfax corridor, is that sort of developers kind of come in and have their own really unique and sometimes not aligned sort of design guidelines and standards for the corridor and the ways things kind of go up. We've had a lot of success in using design standards and design overlay for the 40 West Art Line and also for Lamar Street. And I'm just wondering, are there plans and discussion to potentially do some of that work along Colfax corridor, sort of in alignment with what you're saying in the plan regarding superior design guidelines for public spaces and landscaping? And that's my last question.
I think with the comprehensive plan, you'll see that the design guidelines are in play for the city of Lakewood. And so we, again, we're not working in silos, so working with our planning team, with our public works team of what this could look like as we are issuing these RFPs. If there are specific things that we are going to hold a potential proposer accountable to, we can include that language absolutely into the RFP.
Commissioner Icruz.
Thank you. Echoing the gratitude for the presentation and for the work that your team has put into this. I know that the Colfax corridor is one of our council priorities, as well as just something that we've heard from a lot of community and our zoning conversations that people want to really dig into and look into revitalization. So I think that this sounds like a really great bones of that plan. And so I appreciate your work on that. Just a couple of questions. One logistical question. For the study you're referencing on the highest and best use of some of those vacant properties, do you have a sense of when the timeline for that is and when we could maybe look at that? I'd just be curious.
It should be ready by the next LRA meeting in September. So we are reviewing the initial draft right now.
Okay, great. That's very exciting. Thank you.
Yeah.
Some broader questions. I was curious, I think some pushback sometimes we get in the community around some of our land acquisitions or some of our investments is sort of this like private versus public control of the land and what that means in terms of like the affordability and community driven nature of its use moving forward. And so I was just curious what sort of our parameters are for our land purchases with like the possibility for the authority or a public entity like retaining the land and working with private entities to develop it, or do we have to sell it for like private use in perpetuity?
I think the LRA is really meant to catalyze development. And so we have 25 years to spend the tax increment that's collected. And so we have 4 years left to spend down funding on Colfax. And so LRA will not exist on Colfax after these 4 years. And so really the land is meant to be leveraged for whether it's an incentive or be acquired by the city or by another partner developer. I think there's a lot of things that can be explored, but the LRA will not be able to own that property.
Okay, that's helpful. So just repeating that back, it sounds like a public entity could own the land as a partnership of sorts, but it wouldn't be the authority.
Yeah. So, for example, if we have a parcel that we're looking into that is owned by RTD, and we can leverage some of our the land purchase funding, we could work with RTD on a joint venture partnership, and so they could take that land, but we would have a potential ground lease over many years of what that could look like if we yield the property over to them.
Okay. Yeah, that's super helpful. Thank you. Second question, I know that and was excited to see sort of like the placemaking tenet of the framework of things you all are thinking about. How does that fit into some of the categories you're thinking about for the 2026-27 budget cycle?
I think in a lot of the placemaking, we have a really strong partner with the Colfax bid and 40 West. And so I think there's a lot of partners that are working on a lot of placemaking activities. And so that last bucket for eligible activities will likely be in that placemaking sphere. Again, a lot of these are meant to be permanent investments. So the programming side is a little bit harder to justify through state statute. But if there is a sculpture that we funded in past in like Clear Creek and another program area. We could also do that here, where we have an activation utilizing a public artwork potentially that we could invest in. But usually it's like capital projects and permanent projects.
Okay, great. And so that would be sort of in the partner identified eligible activities
Yep.
arena. Okay.
Yep.
Great. Because yeah, I think like we've heard sort of about some of the moving west of the placemaking and art, and I think folks are excited about that. So would love to see us deepen that investment as we're working on this spend out. And my final question, I know we've heard a lot of times from different presenters across the different bodies we sit on about how challenging it is in new builds to create affordable space for small and local businesses, kind of driving some of the lack of like vacant spaces we're seeing in some of our mixed use designed properties in the city. And so I was just kind of curious, like, what tools within that pot of funds can we use to attract and retain local businesses along the Colfax corridor, even like in these mixed use, like in something that would be built new, or in some of this commercial land, like incentive development and et cetera. I'm just curious, like, what that would look like, how our dollars could help fix that problem.
I think the economic landscape is pretty challenging right now for developers just to build, to make their capital stacks and pro formas make sense with just the rates, with insurance costs, like everything's expensive. So what the funds could do overall in collective could be that incentive. And so if there is a project that is private developers are moving forward on Colfax, and we think there could be a better use for it, we could have those negotiations and leverage, like, okay, there's a gap in funding, right? We can tap into that gap financing to encourage that mixed use development to happen that might not have happened before. So a lot of just urban renewal funds, it's if not but for argument. And so if these funds did not exist, this development would not have happened, right? If this fund was not allocated, we could not do this work. And so I would encourage the whole board, as we are putting more plans forward in the coming year, that this is meant to be catalytic of like, okay, this is stuff that we can invest in that we normally would not have if we didn't have this tax increment financing. So with the business preservation piece, there are a lot of legacy businesses on Colfax. And so it's not out of the question for some of this funding to be allocated to adaptive reuse. And so if there's someone that is wanting to repurpose a current existing parcel, we could absolutely use these funds for that. But just want to set the expectation that adaptive reuse is very, very expensive, but it's not impossible. But hopefully we can leverage a lot of this public financing and this funding for with our private development community.
Thanks, that's helpful. Just to maybe clarify for myself the last point before I cede the floor, so as an example, like the new development that went up, I think around Eaton and Colfax, right? I think it has like bottom floor mixed use, but there's not a tenant in there. And so like, are these types of fund, would it be LRA funds, or could it be another bucket of fund? Like, is there a way for us to help encourage like the tenancy or use of some of the unactivated properties we have now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in my first presentation, right, is like we all work in different complements. And so we know LRA is very much just capital projects and infrastructure. So we can build and hopefully they will come. The Economic Development Fund is where we can use that leverage for attraction of those businesses or preserving the existing businesses. So we can use the Economic Development Funds for that activation.
Thank you.
Of course, thanks.
Commissioner Sinks.
Thank you very much. And thank you for that presentation. I enjoyed the delineation between how the different funds differ. So thank you for that. Mainly a couple of comments. And the first comment is, as we do the placemaking, whether we have signage or art or whatever, I hope we'll keep in mind and honor the indigenous peoples that were there before us, whether, like I said, whether it be on a sign or whatever, just to be sure to honor them and the history of Colfax. So that would be my real choice and delight to see that happen. And then I also just need to make another comment, and this is really for us, the Housing Policy Commission, and what we need to do to act to get some affordable housing units as we work with developers on this. And also I think it's been talked about with the ground floor being the commercial and the upper floors being residential for the mixed use. And of course, mixed use could also then be that it's not just, in the same building, but it's in a related building too, if that would work as well. But it seems like you're saying that it's mainly mixed use going to be on the lower floor. Is that correct?
It can be mixed use throughout. And so if we have a
Yeah.
great new restaurant that wants to take 2 floors, we can have that. So I think we're not trying to prescribe too much what we would like the private market to come forth with, but we want them to be creative in that. So again, the RFP could have, we want mixed use developments to come forth. And so we can evaluate those and score them. So the creativity is where that could be helpful.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's all I had.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kenworthy.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. Always learn something new every time I come to the LRA meetings. My first question, just for from the public school standpoint, is can you verify for me that the only school property that sits within the current West Colfax corridor boundaries is Mulholm, the Mulholm property?
I would need to get back to you on that, Commissioner. I don't have it off the top of my head. I can follow up.
Okay. I know we have other schools that are adjacent to the corridor boundaries, but I'm trying to just verify what do we actually have that's in there.
Okay.
I think my other question will be, do you have any idea what the estimated net property tax increase might be for your taxing entity partners that we would receive in 2031 once the TIF snaps back?
Also a good question. Let me see if I can pull that up. I don't have it off the top of my head, but we've seen double from the other corridors in evaluating those closeout reports. And so even just with natural market, I think it should likely double, but I will also validate and confirm.
Great, I appreciate that. And I think that's all my questions for right now. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. I would add, excuse me, Iber Elementary, I believe, is in that articulation area too. So, Commissioner Lowe.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chan, for this. This is great. Sorry to hear you don't have AC on a day like this, and sorry to keep you in the hot seat. No pun intended. Will, let me just ask an even higher level question, if possible. This is great. We appreciate this. The plan looks good to me. Candidly, I think I'm just going to speak for myself. Maybe I'm speaking for others. When we get a presentation like this, we review the 2026, 2027 funding plan with the 4.5 million for mixed use housing and commercial land purchase. I mean, it sounds good. It all sounds good. I frankly think a lot of folks on this, on the LRA, have a lot of confidence in your leadership and are grateful that you're going to be playing such a role in implementing the plan. What I will say is I'll echo what I think some other commissioners already said. And I don't think this is controversial. I mean, council, the Colfax corridor is a council-wide priority. It's a city-wide priority. We said it that way. There's, I represent a ward that doesn't touch Colfax, and yet, I think wanting the Colfax corridor to thrive and some concern about some of the, on the one hand, some amazing civic leaders that are really investing in the corridor, but also a sense that it's up against some real challenges, feels like a very real citywide priority. So this is a very general question, but absent just sort of continuing to support the financial plan that you brought in front of us today and give and support sort of the deployment of these resources toward the Colfax corridor, is there anything else that you need from the LRA in future meetings or over the next year to support the corridor? Or is there anything else you just want to put on the table for topics, for future conversation? I guess I would just urge that there's a lot of eagerness, maybe even a touch of desperation, to be thinking as expansively as possible about how we can leverage, innovative, financing, the type of which you've kind of briefly alluded to tonight, to do everything possible to kind of help the Colfax corridor. So, like, is there anything else that you need from this body beyond just approving this plan?
I think
And feel free to think
partnerships.
about that more.
Yeah, I think the main piece is, even it's like 4.5 is like a large amount, it's not going to be enough for all that's needed. And so I think there's a lot of desire to leverage these funds for more. And so if there are interested, as you guys are out in community and you hear about development projects that are occurring, if there's an opportunity for us to scale out those projects, if there is alignment with those developers, those project partners, that we can leverage this fund, would be ideal. I think, again, these funds are meant to be catalytic. And so if we can use it to leverage that 4.5 for much more, for a larger project, I think really the goal is like public-private partnerships are what sustains the LRA. And so as you guys have these conversations, if there's anyone interested, even from the economic development side, the other hat I wear, if there's a business, a retailer, a restaurant that is having concerns or is interested in a project, I think there's a lot of funding that we proposed tonight that we can work with them. I think this is what's exciting, is there's funding to leverage, and there's a great opportunity in Colfax, and there's already a lot of city investments that's going into Colfax, and I think the momentum, we just want to keep that moving forward. But please pass along any project partners, financial partners, funding partners would be great.
Well, thanks, Mr. Chan. And just related to that, I would, in terms of sort of leveraging other funding resources, Commissioner Sink's already brought up the Housing Policy Commission. I'll just note that it is my hope that over the next 6 or so months, we'll be in a position to bring forward an ordinance that creates a new housing affordability fund. And it is my hope, as you all think about vacant properties along the Colfax corridor, that there could be some synergies there in terms of, if we're able to capitalize a housing affordability fund. I would love, in terms of the funding plan that you're talking about tonight, if we could think about ways that, like, we could also draw on those dollars for affordable housing projects on the Colfax corridor, we'd love to see those dollars deployed and get more of the sort of affordable mixed type of housing that you're describing in this plan. So hopefully we'll have a chance to make that a reality in the next 6 months.
We're to continue conversations.
Commissioner Ryan.
I don't want to cut in line in front of you.
That's okay. Go ahead.
Well, as you pointed out, and thank you very much for the presentation, Mr. Chan. One of the things that I guess I'm still struggling with and have for the last couple of years is I'm not sure that the city has a vision of what it wants West Colfax to be. Right. And so when we say, here's $4.5 million to be able to buy some property to do what? It'd be nice if there was a vision where we could say, here's what we're trying to get to, and here's all the baby steps we're trying to take to get to that vision. And we're going to bring this pot of money to make that happen. We're going to bring the economic development money to make that happen. At some point, are we going to see a vision of what we're trying to accomplish on West Colfax to activate that and make it the best part of the Denver Metro?
Yeah, I think there's in that pre-development site readiness, I think there's a lot of internal conversations of that opportunity and the excitement for Colfax. It's a big, it's a behemoth of order to tackle. But I think there's, again, we at least our team has some plans for, again, leveraging these studies that have been put out and really taking that next phase of how we can actually implement. I think there's I think there's a lot of interest in how we can have a cohesive identity for Colfax. Even though it's very, very long, I think there's a lot that we can leverage with like the current business community, the arts, and Colfax is just a also for the city, I think an important corridor, whether it's on the economic development side or the LRA side, that we are looking at how we can reinvest in different ways for that visioning. It's not a good answer because it's not an answer, but I think I think there's for Commissioner Ryan, we can work on that and present something as we aggregate all of these studies in the coming months for something that's more cohesive. I think it's a big chunk of money, but there is some there's strategy behind of like what we think it could be in terms of preserving that grit that's on Colfax already and that identity with something that is more intentional and more sustainable and more long term. So
yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. No, I would appreciate that. I would just very much like, and I know you guys are incredibly busy and pulled 20 different ways, but I'd very much love the city, your team to be able to sit down with community, the different stakeholders there and say, now here's our budget. What are we trying to do? Right. And how can the city start accomplishing some small pieces of that vision so that when we wake up 10 or 15 years from now, works, everybody's excited and amazed at how we got there and all that. With the $4.5 million, is there a particular parcels, you don't have to identify them now if you have, but are there any parcels that have been identified, or is this just we think this is kind of what the going rate would be if we were to acquire something, and so we're going to placehold $4.5 million?
It's a placeholder. So it's meant to underscore that this is the majority of what we currently have. We'll go towards this, like knowing that we have all these elements that we need to have happen for that. And so if there's more money for it, that'd be great. But there's no current land that we have identified. And we're hoping to have that, again, by September when we have that study completed.
Great. And then the last question is, when we approve this budget, are these, like, for example, the $4.5 million, is that set in stone where that $4.5 million can only go towards acquisitions and can't be, if we don't actually use $4.5 million for a land acquisition, can we shift that money into some of these other buckets as the year's going on?
I think there is some flexibility for that. Everything that we present in the coming year for this funding plan will have to go to the Board of Commissioners as well for your approval. And so we can, if there's an exception or there's something that is worth prioritizing, should that arise, we can have that conversation together as a board.
Okay, great. Thank you, Councilwoman, or our chair, for indulging me there.
Yeah, thank you. All right, I have a couple questions before we start with second rounds. Mr. Director Chang, can you talk about who the $250K for pre-development and site readiness study, like who is doing that? That is for us at the city, or that is a partnership with developers?
That's a partnership with independent consultants that have no tie to it. So it would be EPS, for example, provided a study on the blight study for Sheridan in the last meeting. And so it would be firms that can provide an impartial assessment of what those properties could be generally. And it's also a public public RFP process for those consultants.
Got it. Thank you. That's helpful. I guess for me, like, especially since we're so close to the end of this long process, like those studies they exist. Like we know what needs to happen. And so when I think about how that money could be used, and I sort of reflect on what we saw from the business improvement districts, like their letters that they submitted, and they've been great partners to us. And going back to your other slides, how these agencies talk to each other, I'd much rather see that money allocated to the partner identified eligible activities, because I truly think, to Commissioner Ryan's point, like we're not going to buy land is not going to get us out of like the sort of pressure that we're feeling with the West Colfax corridor. And the vacancy rate is staggering. So is there ways that we can think creatively? Like I know that downtown Denver, when they were working to bring life back into that corridor, was offering like 3 months of rent for folks who want to sort of prop up. Like those are the sort of creative things. And I know that there are limitations because it really has to be more about like land acquisition and public improvements. But I do think that we have made the case in the past for how we can allocate some of those dollars to the partners that are doing that work. And I just think that there are so many smaller parcels that could be activated quickly that I am concerned. And I appreciate Counselor Cruz's point just around the activation with multi-use, like the ground floor, we depend on that getting activated, but we sort of post and pray that that happens. And we see with Oak Street Station, that building is celebrating more than a decade, in my understanding, of being open, and it has never activated its ground floor. So just building it isn't going to be enough. So I'd love a little bit, as much flexibility and creativity as we can have on that, I think would be really helpful.
Yeah, and I
And with
think that's a piece where Commissioner Lowe had brought up too, where it's that partnership. And so if there are pieces that you think would be, if there are parcels that you have identified in the different wards that are worth evaluating further, or whether it's the ED side or the LRA side, I would encourage us to send that over so that we can actually like know what's going on and address it directly.
I'll tell you right now, Millard to Sims, the
Okay.
south side of West Colfax, like is mostly vacant. And that's just not like $4.5 million in purchasing big parcels isn't going to like get us out of that. And so if there are ways to allocate the dollars here to some of the other agencies that can do that different activation, I think it's great that we bought the hotels that we did, but I also, in reflection, wish that we had used those properties a different way because, then we sat on vacant land. And I think that there's just other ways to really activate the corridor. I really appreciate the presentation, though. This is really helpful as we get close. It's hard to believe that we're coming to the end of such a long time. Reinvestment, I hope that when we get to the end of those 4 years, we're going to see something pretty different in the corridor. And then with that, Commissioner Sinks, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you. So to piggyback on Councillor Rines, is there a vision? And boom, a vision flashed in my head. With all of the apartments that we have along Colfax, some that are in existence, some that are being built, wow, it would be so great to have some walkable areas, a walkable neighborhood, all the retail be walkable. And that vision, of course, is not just, we don't ever see that. I think of Edgewater Marketplace. Of course, that is enclosed, but something like that would be awesome, as well as the Arvada Beer Garden around 52nd and Garrison. So a big area that could just open up and could be a community space. And then, by the way, too, I love what the Parks and Rec does. They say, hey, we have this property. How do you want this park to look? What kind of things do you want with that? So the city already does a really good marketing, like what's the vision, for this? Do you want it to be mainly sports? Do you want it to be mainly for quiet places, natural, whatever? And maybe then that same concept could be put out there in some meetings with citizens. What would be your ideal vision for some property along Colfax? But as I said, my vision would be honoring and giving homage to Indigenous peoples, as well as some walkable area with, retail, etc. Which, again, to my point earlier, mixed use doesn't have to mean that it's on the ground floor. It can also mean, separate buildings or separate sections, on a property. So thank you.
We're heading into the last 2 minutes, but I'll try to address as much as I can. But if there are more, please do feel free to email me, and I'll email responses to y'all.
Counselor Cruz.
Thanks. I appreciate the conversation and all the information so far. The only thing I just wanted to emphasize for all of us and like thinking about this plan, I've heard a couple of times, like, yeah, some of the investments in the infrastructure and in like buying land might not go far across the whole corridor, but I think like looking to our comprehensive plan, looking to create hubs or making meaningful like investments in a place, like whether that's further west or thinking about like I do think we have some transformative opportunities just beyond like short-term subsidization and pieces like that. So I appreciate there being a significant budget for land acquisition and want us to think about how I'm excited for the highest and best use study to kind of think about what those corridors are and how we activate them. So thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner.
All right, and we'll take one last question from Commissioner Ryan.
Not so much as a question, but do we have the ability to, as this body, to suggest that, say, $100,000 be allocated to Commissioner Sherazai's comment about either through the city or allowing the bids to give incentives for small businesses, such as a free rent for a month or so? And my thought would be that the 100,000 would come from one of the first 5 buckets somewhere in there at the city's discretion where they think it makes the most sense. I wouldn't touch the partner the partner funds, but that my suggestion would be if we would to take 100,000 and allocate it for that purpose, that the city would then be able to work with the bids.
Yeah, I think the eligibility piece is the hard, like so for the rent piece, like that's something that the LRA would not be able to fund with statute. And so we can definitely be creative and continue this conversation offline, but I think there's a lot of pieces with how limited the URA is and what we can and can't fund when we have to report back to the state.
Okay.
All right, thank you for that, and thank you for these insightful presentations. I see no further business, so with that, we'll go ahead and adjourn the LRA meeting at 7:01.
Thanks so much. Have a good night.
Thanks. So stay tuned.